Hello everyone.
Hello everyone.
Welcome back to our book club. I am Miss Maka.
And I am Mr. Darrell. Today we are going to talk about the absolute classic, Pride and Prejudice.
By Jane Austen. But before we start talking about the book itself, let's look at our agenda. Firstly, we will focus on the vocabulary. Then we will talk about the author, Jane Austen. Later, we will talk about the short story of this book, the summary of the book.
And there are many characters to talk about, which we will do after that. And then we'll talk about the setting. It's an interesting setting in the 19th century. And then we will look at the main themes that are in the book.
Yes, and finally, we will have a conclusion and, of course, give you a homework.
I'm looking forward to the homework responses to today's question.
Yes, me too.
First, we should move on to the vocabulary list of our lesson today. I'm going to pronounce them a few times, give you the definition, and then maybe you, Ms. Maka, can give us the Georgian translation.
Yes, of course, surely. I will do.
Okay, our first word is favorable. Favorable. This is something that's advantageous or encourages or seems promising for the future.
ხელსაყრელი, კეთილგანწყობილი, სასურველი.
Our next word is posthumously. Posthumously. Something done after a person has died.
სიკვდილის შემდეგ.
Our next word is sensible. Sensible. Having or using or showing good sense or sound judgment.
კეთილგონიერი.
Our next word, deceive. To deceive. To be unfaithful to others.
მოტყუება, იმედის გაცრუება.
Next word, quick-witted. Quick-witted. Having a nimble, quick, alert mind.
საზრიანი, მარჯვე.
Our next word is uneventful. Uneventful. Not eventful, lacking in importance, and no striking occurrences.
მოვლენების და გამორჩეულობის გარეშე.
Our next word is inevitability. Inevitability. The fact that something cannot be avoided or prevented.
გარდაუვალობა.
And our last word, to abandon. To abandon. To leave something completely, to leave it behind forever.
მიტოვება. Okay, Mr. Darrell, thank you very much. And now it's time to have a question for our audience, from the vocabulary part, of course. With quick-witted, we have an example of a compound adjective. Can you come up with 3 more compound adjectives using the word tempered?
If we continue the category of compound adjectives describing personality, 3 common adjectives that I would say are hot-tempered, quick-tempered, and ill-tempered.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, these words are quite common in English conversations, right?
They're very usual adjectives that we would use to describe a person.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think our next question for the audience on vocabulary is, can you give us the noun form and the adjective form of the verb to abandon?
The noun form is abandonment and the adjective form is abandoned.
Great, that is exactly the answer I was looking for.
Yes, and of course you should always know the word formation to put them correctly in the sentence.
It builds up your vocabulary
Yes.
if you know the word formation
Of
rules.
course.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on to the author now. So we are talking about really one of the greatest British writers of all time, Jane Austen. She was an English novelist whose books, set amongst the English middle and upper classes, are notable for their wit, social observation, and insights into the lives of 19th century women.
So Jane Austen was born in 1775 in village in Hampshire. She was one of the 8 children of a clergyman and grew up in a close-knit family. so close-knit and in a very friendly family. She began writing as a teenager.
Her first novel, Sense and Sensibility, appeared in 1811. But today's novel, Pride and Prejudice, was her favorite. She described it as her darling book. But remember, all of her novels were published anonymously.
Yeah. In 1816, she suffered from ill health due to Addison disease, probably. She traveled to Winchester for some kind of treatment, but she died in 1817. So two novels, these were Persuasion and Northanger Abbey, were published posthumously, and there was one more novel that was actually left incomplete.
Very good, Ms. Maka. I think it's time for a question to the audience now. And our question is this. Do you think that coming from a large family developed her social observation skills?
I think the answer is most likely yes, because she had many siblings in time when women didn't travel much or meet many people, yet she still have many chances to observe ordinary people's lives.
Okay, that's a great answer. How else were people in that time supposed to meet a wide range of people?
Yes, of course, from the acquaintances of their siblings and their own, of course.
Relatives.
Yes. So, now let's move on to the summary of the book. Pride and Prejudice is a story of the Bennet sisters. So there were 5 sisters: Jane, Elizabeth, Kitty, Mary, and Lydia. Their mother wants to marry them to some noble men because they wouldn't inherit their family house. So they kind of needed some kind of care. So when they hear that there is Mr. Bingley, a nobleman, coming to visit in their neighborhood, their mother does everything to make Mr. Bingley fall in love in one of the girls.
Yes, and he actually falls in love with Jane, the eldest daughter, and she loves him back. In the meanwhile, his friend, who spends time with him on that holiday, falls in love with Elizabeth, and he makes her a proposal, but she refuses. And his friend is Mr. Darcy.
Yes, in fact, she hates Mr. Darcy because a young soldier, Mr. Wickham, told her that Mr. Darcy has some kind of dark history, dark past, so he is not trustworthy. At the same time, Mr. Bingley leaves, abandoning Jane, who finds her hopes deceived. So again, one more time, also Elizabeth is told about Darcy, that this was Darcy who made Mr. Bingley leave, and now Elizabeth has even more reasons to hate Darcy.
But later we can see that when Lydia Bennet, the youngest sister, follows Mr. Wickham, Darcy finds them in London and persuades Mr. Wickham to marry Lydia by paying a lot of money. And when Elizabeth hears about Darcy helping her sister, she changes her mind. She realizes that she loves him and accepts his wedding proposal.
So, we have talked more or less about the love story, but we didn't really speak about the ending of Mr. Bingley's and Jane's love story. Of course, you should read the book to get the answers. How did their love story end?
Very good. I think it's time we moved on to the characters.
Yes.
There are several characters to look at today. We've chosen about 5. And I'll start with Elizabeth Bennet. She is the novel's protagonist. She is the most intelligent and sensible of the 5 sisters. She's well-read, quick-witted, and she's got a sharp tongue. What do I mean by that? She is quick to criticize people, and so she has that for her. But she realizes Mr. Darcy's essential goodness, and that overcomes her initial hatred of him.
Yeah, and also we can see that she is kind of a guardian for her sisters, right?
the most mature one.
Yeah, exactly. So the next one is Jane Bennet, the oldest sister in Bennet's family. So she is more reserved and gentler than Elizabeth. The easy pleasantness with which she and Bingley interact contrasts strikingly with the mutual dislike between Elizabeth and Darcy.
Very good. Now, the next sister is Lydia Bennet. She's the youngest sister. She also happens to be the most gossipy, immature, self-involved. And unlike Elizabeth, Lydia flings herself headlong into romance. And she's the one that runs off with Mr. Wickham.
Yeah, so that's why we can call her rebellious one. So the next character is Mr. Darcy, a wealthy gentleman, the master of Pemberley. Though Darcy is an intelligent man and he's quite honest, he still has some kind of problem. This is his excess of pride that causes him to look down on his inferiors. Over the course of the novel, we can see that Darcy falls in love with Elizabeth, and actually he kind of changes his character.
So a change in the character, that's good.
Yeah.
We have, last of all, Charles Bingley. Charles Bingley. It's Mr. Darcy's very wealthy friend, and it was Mr. Bingley's purchase of the mansion at Netherfield, the house that's near the Bennets, that serves as the main impetus for the novel. He's character-wise, he's genial, he's well-intentioned, he's easygoing as well, and it contrasts sharply with Darcy. He's blissfully uncaring about class differences.
Yep, so I really like Mr. Bingley's character, to be honest.
Yeah.
So now it's time for our question. So as we know, there are some typical character traits that birth order influences. Do you think that Bennet sisters reflect this?
I think they do. Jane, the oldest sister, is responsible and calm. Elizabeth is peacemaker, and youngest sister Lydia is rebellious and spoiled.
What a great answer. Yeah. And I think a lot of families follow that pattern. The oldest, the middle, and the younger child.
Yeah, and exactly that's how we know the character traits based on birth order.
Very often. Not always, but very often.
Very often, of course.
We have another question based on our character discussion. Of the two men we spoke about, Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley, who would fit in as a modern man better?
I think Mr. Bingley would fit in better as a modern man because he's more liberal and quite easygoing. Most of the people in his era were concerned about class differences. He didn't care.
Wow, that's a great answer. There we have Jane Austen showing us a modern man.
Yes, and I think that's why I chose Mr. Bingley as the best character from the book.
I agree. Okay, let's move on to a quick look at the setting of this book. Now, as we know, Pride and Prejudice is set in England at some point in the late 1700s and the early 1800s. It's not precisely clear where, but from some clues we can guess it's around the Napoleonic War period, so around that time. And we presume by about 1813.
The action moves between different locations of England, including Brighton, London, the counties of Hertfordshire, Derbyshire, and Kent. But there is little detailed information about the geographic locations given in the book.
Connected to that point, we should remember that these characters couldn't travel very far. Their range of travel was quite limited. So that gave rise to the phenomenon of small parties, close friends, and that was the entire circle of someone at that time.
Yes, and Austen implies the intense psychological drama that we can still unfold even within a small, seemingly uneventful world.
I guess that's true. In any circle of friends, you probably, no matter how small, there's a lot of drama that goes on.
Yeah, but no more drama. Let's go quickly to our question, right? Okay.
Okay, we'll see.
So,
the
we have mentioned that the setting of the novel puts the characters in an uneventful world. What does this mean to you?
For me, an eventual world means having opportunity to experience different things, being stuck in one area and never finding about your limit at who you really are.
very good answer. Yeah. When something's uneventful, you've really got to make the best of it. You maybe have to do something from yourself to make it interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's look at the main themes of the book. The first main theme that we would like to focus on is reputation. Pride and Prejudice depicts a society in which a woman's reputation is of the utmost importance. A woman is expected to behave in certain ways, and stepping outside the social norms makes her vulnerable to be ignored.
There are two examples I can provide to that. The first time is when Elizabeth first comes to Netherfield and arrives with muddy skirts, shocking the neighbors and everyone there. In other points, the ill-mannered Mrs. Bennet, her bad behavior, gives her a bad reputation, and people start judging her from elsewhere.
Yeah. When Lydia starts living with Wickham, the author treats reputation as a very serious matter. By becoming Wickham's lover without some kind of benefits of marriage, Lydia clearly places herself outside the social norms.
Good point.
Yeah.
And the happy ending, of course, of Pride and Prejudice is certainly emotionally satisfying, but that question of reputation is unanswered. It's always hanging at the back of the book, so something to think about when we read the book.
Yes, and now what about the second main theme? This is family. Family is the integral theme of the novel. All of the characters operate within the networks of the family, so connections that shape their decisions and their perspectives.
For the female characters in particular, family affects everything that they do. It's the business of Mrs. Bennet to get her daughters married. And it's because of that many of the plots and plans start in the book.
Yeah. While male characters like Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley, they have, of course, much more independence, like financial independence and social independence. They still rely on the judgment and opinions of female family members.
Now, individuals are judged according to the behavior of family members. And the theme of family shows that individuals never totally lead autonomous lives, independent lives in this era, in this Jane Austen world. And individual actions always have communal implications.
Yes, so we can clearly see in this novel how important the family is for each individual.
I think it's time for a question for our audience. Now, the famous first line of the book is, "It's a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." Think about that. Is it still true today?
Nowadays, it's not true anymore because some people decide not to get married and choose to focus more on their career.
Yeah, I totally agree because I have so many friends focusing on career only. So it's true.
Good answer.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think it is time to wrap up everything today.
Yes, of course, from the beginning of the program, we talked about the author, Jane Austen.
And then we had a look at the summary of the book. It's about the Bennet sisters and their complicated love marriages.
Then we talked about the characters. I would, of course, focus on the main ones. These were Jane and Elizabeth, and Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley.
And remember, the setting of the book is probably the late 1700s and early 1800s. It's not specific where. and England, of course.
Yes, and then we talked about the main themes, the reputation and especially the reputation of women, and about the family, the importance of the families in our lives.
Very good. Okay, let's start once more with the word list of today. Let's start with favorable.
ხელსაყრელი, კეთილგანწყობილი, სასურველი.
Posthumously.
სიკვდილის შემდეგ,
Sensible.
კეთილგონიერი,
Deceive.
მოტყუება,
Quick-witted.
საზრიანი, მარჯვე,
Uneventful.
მოვლენების და გამორჩეულობის გარეშე,
Inevitability.
გარდაუვალობა,
To abandon.
მიტოვება.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah, and now this is the time for the homework for our TV audience.
Okay, we would like this question to be answered. Imagine your friend is going to marry someone without love. You need to convince him or her that it is not a good idea. What would you say? What arguments would you give?
წარმოიდგინეთ, რომ თქვენი მეგობარი აპირებს დაქორწინდეს სიყვარულის გარეშე. თქვენ კი უნდა გადააფიქრებინოთ, რას ეტყოდით, რით დაუსაბუთებდით თქვენს მოსაზრებას.
We'd like the answers to be sent to the address on the screen.
დავალებები გამოგვიგზავნეთ ეკრანზე მითითებულ მისამართზე.
Well, Ms. Maka, I think it's been a great discussion with our audience and with our probably TV audience answers.
Yeah, we are probably lost in some kind of love triangles and love stories, but it was really nice to discuss this topic with you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and the theme of family is what stuck with me.
Okay, yes, it was also interesting. So I guess that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching and see you next week.
Have a great week and goodbye.
Goodbye.